Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. In this 8th video in the series where we're making Meteor Galaxy, I'm going to show you how to make the spaceship launch laser beams. So let's get right into it. Now the laser beams are going to work kind of in a similar way to how the meteors are. So they're going to be traveling in the direction they're facing and then also move around at the same level as the spaceship. So kind of like how the stars move to make the spaceship look like it's moving. And before we write the functions to do that, you probably know the drill by now. We need to set up a few variables. I'm going to make another section right here, and this is going to be laser beam variables. So first, I'm going to define an array. So this is going to be laser beams, and then initialize that to an empty array. And then the next thing that I'm going to add is a max laser beams. So variable max laser beams, just to ensure that we don't get too many. And I'll set that to 15. Next, we're gonna need laser beam speed. So laser beam speed is going to be equal to 25. So they're going to go pretty fast. So that's how much they'll move on each frame. And then I'm also going to add a variable called pressed space, and that's going to be equal to false. This variable is going to be used for when you press space, it'll equal true, and so then it won't call the code to create another laser beam until it's false, just so that when you hold down on the space bar, it won't just fire a ton of laser beams super fast. I want to actually, you have to lift up your hand from the space bar and then press it again to fire the next laser beam. But of course, if you'd like to have some sort of rapid fire functionality, you could program it that way. It's totally up to you, all your design choices. So yeah, let's get right into writing the functions. Let's go down, and I'm gonna put it right just by the run game function. Actually, I'll put right after move ship, since adding laser beams is or firing laser beams is kind of part of the ship's functionality. This is going to be function fire laser beam. So the first thing that we need to do is check the keyboard input. I'm going to set it up kind of in a similar way to how I check keyboard input for moving. So start out with an if statement. So is key pressed? That's the function we're going to use to check. And then keyboard dot space. So we're going to check for the space bar. The first thing that we want to do is set press space to true. So pressed space equals true. The next thing I'm going to do is add another if statement inside of here. This is going to make sure that the space bar hasn't already been pressed, because when it's pressed it calls a code, and we only want this code to be called once per pressed. So if not pressed space, so if we haven't pressed the space bar, we're going to make a new laser. So variable new laser is going to be equal to a new web image. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up to the top right here, and we're going to need to add another object just to hold that laser beam web image, and also make sure it gets loaded in. Now back to the function we were working on, we can use our getImageURL function that we wrote in the last video. So getImageURL, and then it'll be object_map.laserBeam. So we'll get the URL of the laser beam. The next thing that we need to do is set the position. So I'm going to use the setPositionCentered function that we wrote. Then we're going to give it the new laser beam. Actually, I've been calling these laser beams, so I'll just do that to keep it consistent. The position we're going to set it to is going to be get width and then divided by 2, and then get height divided by 2. But what we want to do is offset it from the ship a little bit, and it needs to be offset in the direction that the ship is rotated in. So I'm going to do that with our function that's getMoveX. So right here, using trig to calculate how far it needs to move on the x-axis and if it's rotating in a certain direction, and same with getMoveY. except for the y-axis. So this will be get move x. The rotation is going to be, and actually to make this, these are going to be long lines, so I'm going to just put these on their own lines. So each of the parameters will get its own line. So that's one way that you can write the parameters, just to give yourself a little bit more space. All right, now inside the get move x function, I'm going to use the rotation of the ship, since the laser beam will start out in the same rotation. So it'll be ship rotation. So for the distance, I'll offset that by 25 pixels. And then I'm going to also do the same with the get, on the y position. So it'll be get move y, ship rotation, and 25 pixels. So now we got the 3 parameters in here for setting the position. We also need to set the rotation of the new laser beam. So new laser beam dot set rotation, and then it'll start out as the same rotation of the ship, since it's getting fired out of the ship. So ship rotation. And then next we need to add the new laser beam to the canvas. So that'll be add new laser beam. And also we need to push the new laser beam to our laser beams array. So it'll be laser beams dot push, and then new laser beam. All right, now that we got that, the last thing we need to do is add an else statement right here, and then that'll be pressed space equals false. So that way when we lift up on the space bar, it'll change press space to false. All right, we got all that. The next thing that we need to do is actually make the laser beam move. I'm going to add a second function right here. So function move laser beams. And then inside of here, we need to iterate through all the laser beams and move them. This will look very similar to moving the meteors. So for variable I equals 0, I is less than, it'll be laser beams dot length, and then I plus plus. And then I'm going to have a variable called current laser beam, and that'll be equal to the I index of that laser beams array, so we'll get the reference there. Then next we need to declare 2 variables, so it'll be variable x move and then variable y move, and then we'll set this to scroll x minus last scroll x, and then scroll y minus last scroll y. All right, so now we have movement, so we'll just move them along kind of like the stars do. But next we need to have it actually travel in the correct direction. So we're going to change the move x and move y variables. So I'll go ahead and give a new line. So we're going to add to x move. So x move plus equals, so add to itself, and then get move x. So using that function that we wrote earlier, the rotation is going to be get rotation of the current laser beam. And for the distance it's going to travel, it's going to be laser beam speed. And then on y move, it's going to look really similar. All right, now that we've got that, we need to move the current laser beam itself. So current laser beam dot move, and then x move and y move. So the distance to move on each axis. The next thing that we need to do is make sure that the functions we wrote get called. I'm going to put them inside of the run game function. So there's going to be fire laser beam and move laser beams. And with that, we can test the code and see how it looks. So we'll hit play. I made a little typo. This should be laser beams, plural. All right, let's run that and see how it looks. So if you hit the space bar now, you can see they're not firing in the right direction. The reason why the laser beams weren't going in the correct direction had to do with the angle units, radians and degrees. Right here we're ship rotations and radians, so we need to add the 1, otherwise it'll try to set it as if it were degrees. So now if you run that, it should look pretty good now. You can see the laser beams are kind of coming out of the front of the spaceship like that. They're going the correct direction. You can also fly around and they'll move. But right now, we need to make sure that we don't get too many laser beams because we don't want any performance issues. So we're going to need to limit the amount of laser beams on the screen. So then the next thing I'm going to do is add another condition to this if statement to make sure that we don't have too many laser beams before we add more. So inside of here, I'm going to say and. So it'll be laser beams dot length. So length of the laser beam array. It needs to be less than the max laser beams. So the maximum number of laser beams. The next thing that we need to do is also make sure that once the laser beams travel too far away from the spaceship that we remove them. I'm going to do that inside of the move laser beams function. So right here, I'll add another if statement. So if we're going to check current or get distance. So we're going to get the distance from the center of the screen, since that's where the spaceship is. And then the position of the laser beam. So current laser beam, and then dot get x. And then the same for y. If this distance is greater than get width divided by 1.5. So I'm going to do 1.5 because since it's the distance from the center, I'm not going to do 2 because that would put it right at the edge. We want it to go off a little bit before it disappears. And the reason I didn't make it bigger is because I don't want it to be where you can just fire a bunch of laser beams and then they go way off the screen and then hit some random meteor and then you don't know why you're getting points for no reason. That might be a little bit confusing. So I want it pretty much to only hit meteors that you can actually see, or that you know where they are because you just saw them on screen a moment ago. All right, so if that distance is greater, then we need to remove the meteor. So we'll do that by using the remove function on the array. So that'll be laser beams dot remove, and then I. And then we also need to remove the laser from the canvas. So remove current laser beam. So now that we got that, I'm gonna also wrap the rest in an else statement, and that way we don't need to run this extra code that moves them on the screen because we've just gotten rid of it. Now let's run that again and take a look. Make sure that we can still fire laser beams. As you can see, we can still fire laser beams and things, and now we have a way that gets rid of them so that you don't have too many on the screen. So that's good because you don't want it to get too many and then use up a bunch of memory and things. And so it's a good practice to get rid of the objects that you aren't using. Alright, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. The next video is going to be really exciting because we'll set up the collisions, meaning the spaceship can collide with the meteors and then the laser beams can collide with the meteors as well. This will really make the game more playable and feel more complete, so I hope you all come back for that. I hope you all have a great day. Goodbye.